The Vertical Farm: Feeding the World in the 21st Century by Dr. Dickson Despommier. Narrated by Runnette. Copyright 2010 by Dickson Despommier. This unabridged audiobook is published by arrangement with St. Martin's Press and was produced in the year 2010 by Tantor Media Incorporated, which holds the copyright thereto. For the more than 1 billion people who, through no fault of their own, go to sleep hungry each night, and for the 3 billion more who will most likely arrive on this planet over the next 40 years to join them in their suffering, if nothing changes. Forward. America has had a love-hate relationship with the farm going back for many decades. It now looks as though our relationship to farming has a chance to become more mature, both technologically and culturally, in the 21st century. The farm can be that romantic Rockwellian vision of a simple life, somehow more authentic than the urban, suburban life, which is how most of us live now. We like to see a logo with that caricature image of a little red barn with a silo and paddock next to it on the packaging of our dairy products, eggs, cereals, berries, mushrooms, bacon, etc. We like to think of the farmer as someone possessing good old-fashioned American values and common sense, with a big family of healthy, wholesome children who all go to church every Sunday. An image of people like that, producing our food somewhere, makes us feel better than if we saw where most of our food was actually coming from. But the farm is equally a source of derision and mockery. For both recent immigrants and multi-generational Americans, country can mean unsophisticated. The people we trust to produce enough safe, clean food for us to eat are given little respect on the whole. For many decades, the smart kids were sent off to the city. The less smart stayed back on the farm. It was normal for an individual to move from the farm to the city, but nobody grew up in the city to become a farmer. Some Americans associate working the land with slavery. A great tide of African Americans migrated from the South to the industrial cities of the North to escape the land and everything associated with it. They found better-paying jobs in factories, and those 20th-century manufacturing jobs gave blacks a chance to realize middle-class stability and ambitions. The land was something you left behind. In the minds of many of our relatives and ancestors, the more distant you were from that past, the better. Much of my work over the past decade has centered on horticultural infrastructure with regard to managing stormwater runoff and urban heat island effect. Things like green roofing, urban forestry, and wetland and estuary restoration are all important parts of the solution to those environmental challenges, and they provide great jobs for people who often have difficulty getting a job. But many times when I deliver this message to inner-city communities that are suffering from severe unemployment as well as the health effects of environmental mismanagement, there is resistance. Working the land is seen as a step back, not a step forward. Now that the majority of manufacturing jobs have moved overseas and our agriculture system has long since abandoned the bucolic notion of a family farm in favor of spreadsheet economics, we have a remarkable chance to revise many of those old assumptions and re-examine the good and bad legacies of our agricultural past. We can look at our needs and the technology available to meet those needs in ways that treat the land and the people with more respect and dignity. To be fair, our current food production and distribution system does deliver edible calories to the people at an affordable price, but its toll on both the environment and its consumers is astonishing. The herbicides and pesticides that are applied to the plants wash out into our rivers and oceans, creating dead zones where fishing is no longer viable. That means hardworking people might not have jobs in the seafood industry because of agribusiness decisions made way upstream, decisions that are often subsidized by our tax dollars. Chemical fertilizers leave the soil incapable of supporting plants without even more fertilizer. All these chemicals can eventually make it to the drinking water as well. For folks who live near the trans-shipping centers where the food comes into a city and goes out to grocers, restaurants, etc., the diesel exhaust is thick in the local air and the lungs of anyone who cares to breathe. Children living near these facilities are put at risk by the large trucks passing through their neighborhoods, discouraging active play and exacerbating the obesity epidemic facing our nation. These quality-of-life costs are borne, most often, by poor people with no just compensation. In the time between now and the realization of Dickson Despommier's vision for our food system, there are many opportunities for innovation and entrepreneurship. If the skyscraper farm is like a 747 jetliner, we are now at the stage of the Wright brothers. All kinds of urban micro-agribusinesses are bursting onto the scene in cities across America and in other countries around the world. There will be many failures as a legion of tinkerers and engineers all struggle to take off with the right combination of profitability, sustainability, and quality food. Exciting career ladders are a part of the mix. This work will be perfected over time with more and more minds engaged. New distribution and delivery systems and on-the-vine inventory practices will create competitive arenas with relatively low barriers to entry due to the shorter geographic distances between producer and consumer. Those jobs will bring hope to some of the Americans who once would have been employed by jobs that have been exported. By dramatically reducing the financial burden of fossil fuel-based transport, refrigeration, and chemical inputs, more money can stay in local urban economies where food is produced, and more money will be available for jobs in our cities. The first of these farms will likely be located where the land is least expensive, and that usually means poor neighborhoods. It will be many years before urban farming production capacity even approaches filling the demand out there for food, which means a steady increase for this sector is possible for many years to come. That means many years of living, local, positive examples for economic prosperity that can inspire and employ people for generations. This productive commercial activity will be a welcome relief from the type of economic development we generally see driven into low-income neighborhoods. Low-wage retail, waste handling facilities, stadiums, and jails. It's time we stopped building such tributes to our collective failure to innovate and embrace our fellow Americans. It's time to build monuments to hope and prosperity. Vertical farming represents an elegant opportunity for us to rise to that challenge. Majora Carter. Majora Carter founded Sustainable South Bronx in 2001 to achieve environmental justice through economically sustainable projects informed by community needs. Her work has earned numerous awards, including a MacArthur Genius Fellowship. She was also named one of Essence magazine's 25 most influential African Americans. She is a board member of the Wilderness Society and hosts a special Corporation for Public Broadcasting radio series, The Promised Land, thepromisedland.org. She is currently president of the Majora Carter Group, LLC, a green project development and consulting group. Introduction. 15,000 years ago, there was not a single farm on the planet. Fast forward to the present, when we now farm a landmass the size of South America, which does not include grazing land. Along the way, we invented, among other things, written language, mathematics, music, and, of course, cities. Yet our journey from hunter-gatherers to urban dwellers still hasn't produced a single metropolis that is truly healthy to live in. As populations grew and urban life became the norm, our habit for producing mountains of waste began to take its toll. Garbage provided sustenance for a wide variety of peri-domestic diseases that emerged and then became endemic. For example, in the 12th century, trash of all kinds, strewn carelessly across the European landscape by returning crusaders from the Middle East, attracted hordes of rats. These vermin harbored the plague bacillus, a flea-borne infection. As the rats died, their fleas soon found human hosts to feed on, igniting the first outbreak of the Black Death in Europe. It killed more than 1/3 of all those living there. Cholera came to Europe in 1836 by way of trading vessels from the Bay of Bengal, first to London, England. Because of the high nutrient content of the Thames River, due mostly to garbage dumping, cholera became endemic, killing thousands of Londoners every year until John Snow figured out its modus operandi. You'd think we would have learned something from all this. But as late as the 19th century, waste on the streets of New York City was still causing massive outbreaks of diarrheal diseases. To this day, most cities still haven't found a good use for garbage. New York remains plagued by vermin and poor sanitation-related diseases such as asthma. With landfills for most cities now bulging at the seams, urban communities will have to reinvent waste management. Yet there is hope. All of this is about to change. We now have in our hands the tools and the desire to convert squalid urban blight into places where we'd want to raise our children. Once we have transformed our urban centers, we can turn our attention to renewing the hardwood forests that we destroyed in our zeal to create the farmlands that now produce food for our cities. Sustainable urban life is technologically achievable and, most important, highly desirable. For example, food waste can easily be converted back into energy employing clean, state-of-the-art incineration technologies, and wastewater can be converted back into drinking water. For the first time in history, an entire city can choose to become the functional urban equivalent of a natural ecosystem. We could even generate energy from incinerating human feces if we so desired. We have the ability to create a cradle-to-cradle, waste-free economy. All that is needed is the political will to do so. Once we begin the process, cities will be able to live within their means without further damaging the environment. Vertical farms. Repairing the environment and still having enough good, healthy food choices may seem like mutually exclusive goals. If the world's population continues to increase, wouldn't we need to cut down even more forest to produce enough food to feed everyone? Not necessarily. One solution lies in vertical farms. These farms would raise food without soil in specially constructed buildings. When farms are successfully moved to cities, we can convert significant amounts of farmland back into whatever ecosystem was there originally, simply by leaving it alone. This plan may sound naive and impractical, yet the concept of vertical farming is dead simple. Still, making it happen could require the kind of technical expertise needed for, say, rocket science or brain surgery. Then again, human beings do rocket science and brain surgery quite well. We should not shy away from the challenge of farming vertically simply because it requires cutting-edge engineering, architecture, and agronomy. All of this is within our grasp. We understand the hydroponic and aeroponic farming methodologies needed to grow crops within multi-story buildings. Although there are still no examples of functioning vertical farms, many urban planners have become familiar with the concept and are now looking for ways to make it happen. There are already plans on the drawing board by developers in wealthy countries that are running short of arable farmland. In other places where food is becoming scarce and people are going to bed hungry, vertical farms could eventually solve this seemingly intractable problem. The idea of growing crops in tall buildings might sound strange, but farming indoors is not a new concept. Commercially viable crops such as strawberries, tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, herbs, and a wide variety of spices have made their way from commercial greenhouses to the world's supermarkets in ever-increasing amounts over the last 15 years. Most of these greenhouse operations are small in comparison to the large commercial farms of the American Midwest, but unlike their outdoor counterparts, greenhouse facilities can produce crops year-round. Fish, as well as a wide variety of crustaceans and mollusks, have also been raised indoors. Chickens, ducks, and geese could conceivably be raised in indoor farms as well. Vertical farms are immune to weather and other natural elements that can abort food production. Crops can be grown under carefully selected and well-monitored conditions that ensure optimal growth rates for each species of plant and animal year-round. In other words, there are no seasons indoors. The efficiency of each floor of a vertical farm, 1 acre in a footprint, could be equivalent to as many as 10 to 20 traditional soil-based acres, depending upon the crop. Vertical farms offer many environmental benefits as well. Farming indoors eliminates the need for fossil fuels now used for plowing, applying fertilizer, seeding, weeding, and harvesting. Cities without waste. The ingredients in the dinner you just ate at your favorite restaurant likely came from more than 1,500 miles away. If you had a vertical farm in your city, all the food on your plate could come from down the block, saving huge amounts of fossil fuel now used to refrigerate and ship produce from all over the world. Also, think of what happens to the food you left on your plate. These leftovers, plus the waste generated in the food preparation process, are currently non-recoverable costs, also known as dinner for vermin. Now imagine if this organic waste could be converted back into energy. This would allow restaurants to be paid for the recoverable energy from their waste streams. An industry with a notoriously small 2 to 5% profit margin would be able to earn additional income without raising the prices on its menus. Water, clean and clear. One of the greatest urban health threats comes from liquid municipal waste, black water, which is composed in part of urine and feces. To disarm its potential for causing disease, it is first aerated, a process that breaks the solids into smaller and smaller particles, reduces the biomass, and converts most of the solids to oxygen-consuming bacteria. The mixture is then digested in the absence of oxygen, releasing a significant amount of methane, which some facilities are equipped to collect and use as an alternate energy source. The resulting sludge is culled and used in landfills, while the remaining gray water is chlorinated and discharged into the nearest body of water. In less developed countries, gray water is discarded without treatment. This practice greatly increases the risk of salmonella, cholera, amoebic dysentery, and other infectious diseases being transmitted by fecal contamination. In either case, it's a shameful waste of fresh water. In many cities throughout the United States, sludge derived from wastewater treatment plants is processed further, then turned into high-grade topsoil and sold to farming communities. The cities of New York and Boston, for example, have operating sludge-to-fertilizer schemes. The problem is that most municipal sludge is often heavily contaminated by copper, mercury, zinc, arsenic, and chromium, which limits its use for farming. Some vertical farms could act as stand-alone water-regenerating facilities. A cold brine pipe system could be engineered to aid in the condensation and harvesting of the moisture released by the plants. Plants in the vertical farm could convert safe-to-use gray water into drinking water by transpiration. The fact that the entire farm would be a closed-loop system would allow us to recover this unrealized, highly valued resource. The resulting purified water would then be used in other vertical farms for raising fish and even algae and for growing commercial crops. Ultimately, any water that emerged from the vertical farm would be drinkable, thus bringing it back into the community that brought it to the farm to begin with. New York City discards some 1 billion gallons of treated gray water every day into the Hudson River estuary. If industrial-quality water costs 5 cents a gallon, a conservative estimate, reclamation would well be worth the effort, even if the system cost as much as $30 billion to construct and manage. This is hardly a pie-in-the-sky scheme. A portion of Orange County, California, with a population of approximately 500,000, converts gray water back into tap water using a state-of-the-art purification system that cost its taxpayers $500 million to install. It was worth every penny. The end of pollution. The most pressing case for urban agriculture lies in our failure to handle waste, in particular, agricultural runoff. Leftover irrigation water laden with pesticides, herbicides, fertilizer, and silt. Agriculture is responsible for more ecosystem disruption than any other kind of pollution. What's more, today's farmers can't do much about it. Floods dictate the timing and extent of runoff. Some 70% of all available fresh water on Earth is used for irrigation, and the resulting unused portion is returned to countless rivers and streams. Runoff that reaches the oceans disconnects other ecological systems. Nitrogen fertilizer, ammonium nitrate, has the chemical property of absorbing oxygen from water. Agricultural runoff reduces the vibrant, abundant undersea life of coral reefs to barren remnants. Deforestation for purposes of freeing up farmland reinforces this toxic cycle by adding more nitrogen fertilizer to the mix and by further reducing the Earth's capacity to sequester carbon from the atmosphere. In a city with vertical farms, waste will be replaced with the recovery of unrealized energy. In nature, there is no waste. In the new eco-city, discarding anything without finding another use for it would be quite unthinkable. Imagine how absurd it would be to siphon off a gallon's worth of gasoline from the family car and pour it down the sewer. Yet this is the equivalent to what we are doing with everything we now throw away. Cities of the near future. Today's cities fail to meet even the minimum standards of self-reliance. No city lives within its own means. Everything consumed is produced outside the city, and as a result, waste accumulates at an alarming rate. A mid-sized city annually produces gigatons of solid material and billions of gallons of wastewater. Add to that the billions of dollars spent annually trying to get rid of this unwanted material, and you have a clear picture of our current environmental crisis. But it doesn't have to be this way. Technology continues to astound us with new proof of the inventiveness of the human species. Computers keep getting faster and more sophisticated. We are contemplating establishing colonies on the moon and on Mars. We have even collected the dust emitted from the tail of a comet. Yet despite this astounding prowess, most of the Earth's inhabitants remain oblivious to the profound and largely negative effect they have on the planet. We continue to urbanize without building cities that are equipped to handle their populations. Most evolutionary biologists agree that continued failure to live within our means will relegate the human species to the fossil record. Science has led the way in helping us to understand the toll we are taking on the planet. Satellites report on the status of many of the factors that contribute to climate change. Ground-based and satellite observations of coal-burning power plants, for example, support the unavoidable conclusion that we are the root cause of it. Now that we've identified the problem, we can devote our energy to finding a set of solutions. Producing food crops in mass quantities within the city limits would be a step in the right direction. The good news is that many of us are already trying to repair the environment through scientific research and philanthropic support. This is good evidence of our ability to behave in a selfless and altruistic manner when we have the opportunity to do so. It's time to accept our connectedness to the rest of the natural world. There is only so much natural capital out there, and we are on the verge of exhausting it. Building self-sustaining cities now will allow the land to heal itself, thereby restoring balance between our lives and the rest of nature. Chapter 1. Remodeling Nature. Nothing endures but change. Heraclitus. Down on the farm. 10 to 12,000 years ago, all over the globe, humans began systematically to modify their environment by purposely domesticating parts of the natural world to meet their basic biological needs. Creating a reliable source of food and water was at the top of their list. Apparently, as if a switch had been thrown, we nearly unanimously tired of hunting and gathering. We learned how to grow crops derived from wild plants, corn, wheat, barley, rice, and to selectively breed various four-legged animals into tame versions of their wild counterparts for food, transportation, and, of course, labor. We catapulted out of the biosphere and into the technosphere, where we now find ourselves deeply embedded. Along the way, all natural systems suffered under our heavy foot of progress. It's the progress part of our history that we are currently having a problem with. The environmental crises of today have their roots deeply embedded in that last bit of human evolution. To understand the cumulative negative effects we have had on the natural world since we began to urbanize, we must first understand the essence of what the world was like without us. For glimpses of its former glory, see the BBC production Planet Earth. To see what the world might become again if we were to suddenly disappear, see Alan Weisman's book, The World Without Us. By grasping the basics of what allows natural assemblages of plants and animals to organize into mutually dependent networks called ecosystems, we gain insight into how a city might be redesigned to mimic that process. It is my contention that if the built environment could behave by reflecting the integration of functions equivalent to that of an ecosystem, life would be a lot more bearable for all of us, and more economically stable, too. Nature's Manifesto. The biosphere matured when terrestrial plants and animals became mutually dependent upon each other in a harmonic, symbiotic relationship. This took place over billions of years of evolutionary history. One current theory as to how all this happened, proposed first by Lynn Margulis and James Lovelock, who termed it the Gaia hypothesis, suggests that once primitive life on Earth arose, it began to modify the environment to suit its own needs. Today, most geochemists and ecologists would agree that this theory is the most reasonable explanation for how nutrients become recycled, down to how the ambient temperature of the entire planet is maintained. Symbiosis became the norm and now defines all of nature. Virtually every living thing can be shown to be dependent, either directly or indirectly, upon all other living things, except perhaps for those microbial extremophiles that live off the scant nutrients stored in solid rock. All green plants are able to grow and reproduce using only the energy contained in sunlight, together with water, and a few, at least 16, essential minerals they obtain from the solid substrate, mostly soil. They excrete oxygen, their gaseous waste product, into the atmosphere and store sugars and proteins in their tissues. Herbivorous animals, humans included, take advantage of this bonanza of resources, inhaling oxygen and eating plants to fulfill nutritional requirements. Animals then routinely excrete solid and liquid wastes into the environment, future plant nutrients, and exhale carbon dioxide, our gaseous waste product, into the atmosphere, providing photosynthetic plants the opportunity to continue the cycle of life. When plants and animals die, as they all must, communities of soil-based microbes known as detrivores return the elements contained in their carcasses to the earth by process of decay, providing a kind of natural fertilizer for the next generation of plants. It's a natural ashes-to-ashes strategy for nutrient recycling. It has existed this way for some 400 million years, and will undoubtedly go on for some time to come, with or without us. The fact that it has survived for so long in the face of extraordinary environmental changes suggests strongly that it is an incredibly resilient and highly redundant system, one that is almost impossible to destroy. This augurs well for the ability of fragmented ecosystems to repair themselves if we simply learn how to keep our hands off and mind our own business. Strength in numbers. When a mixed group of plant species, all with similar tolerances for temperature and humidity, grow in a given geographic region, their very presence attracts animals of different species to co-inhabit that region. The result is the eventual establishment of mutually dependent relationships in which all the life forms in that zone, including the microbes, join to share in the flow of energy provided by the sun. This is the bare-bones definition of a functional ecosystem. Ecosystems are also known as biomes. Mostly, ecosystems refer to terrestrial situations, and for our purposes I will stick to this definition. The one characteristic they all share is that primary productivity, The total mass of plants produced over a year in a given geographically defined region is limited by the total amount of energy received and processed. In fact, the amount of available energy.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?